My name is Rizki Ratnafuri.
Hello, my name is Naimatul Azizah.
Hi, my name is Hermawan Wibisono.
Today, from our group, will be present about making and acknowledging payment.
I'm going to explain about making payment later. So let's check this out.
Okay, making payment. Definition of making payment. A payment letter is a letter sent from buyer to the seller stating that the item has been received and the payment probably meets the agreed upon. And this is like from buyer to seller. And this slide, you can see a letter made by the buyer to advise the seller that payment is complete. Okay, next, parts of making payment. First, heading is a letterhead, and the letterhead must have the name of company, full company address, company logo, contract information like phone number, proximal number, email address, website URL, and company registration number, but if applicable. Next, reference number. The previous reference number of the seller letter to the buyer and reference number of letter to be sent. Next, date. When the letter made. Next, inside address. Who will get the letter? The next one, salutation. It's like, dear Mr., dear Mrs. This is to whomsoever it may concern. You must already know the name of the person who will receive the letter because it was in the previous letter. But if you don't know the name of the person, you can use like dear sir or dear miss. The next one, subject. This is the section where in brief and concise terms you will mention the subject of the letter. In the specific case of a late payment letter, you can mention the bill or invoice number. Next, opening paragraph. In this section, you must inform the recipient of the letter that you have received the letter and bill from the seller. Next, reporting an interaction or an action. Notifying the recipient of the letter that payment has been made using an agreed payment method such as instructing the bank to send payment or enclose check to the letter. Next, closing paragraph. The letter writer asks the recipient of the letter to provide information or confirmation or an official receipt to the buyer when he has received the money sent and all payment processes has been completed. Next, complimentary clause. This like final goodbye, yours sincerely, yours faithfully, or cordially. But informal, you can use best regards, as ever, or just regard. The next signature, name and position. For the example is accounting management. And the next carbon copies. This is a payment check. Okay, next phrase. For the opening paragraph, you can use thank you for invoice number blah 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 of blah blah blah. And next, thank you for your letter of blah 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 and enclosed invoice number blah blah blah. And last example, we have received your letter of blah 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 and enclosed invoice number blah blah blah. Next, reporting and interaction. The example, We have instruction our bank to remit the sum of dollar or rupiah, blah blah blah. Maybe you can um 2000 or something like that for the credit of your account at bank, like a BRI, BNI, or something like that. Or we can use we enclose here with our check number, blah blah blah, amounting to dollar or rupiah, blah blah blah, in settlement of your invoice number, blah blah blah. Next, closing paragraph. This is much important because you must need closing paragraph, yeah. You can use Princeton as your official receipt for this settlement. Okay, this is tips for writing a letter of payment. Okay, first make sure you state explicitly what the payment is for, or what the payment the letter is in regard to. 2. Make sure you include the transaction information in your letter to make it easier from the receipt to the process. And maybe you cannot be straightforward and polite. There is no need to rebel, but a thank you gets a lost way. Okay, the next one, sample of making payment. Here you can see a list of heading, reference number, deadline, inside address, salutation, and the all part of payment letter. Okay, maybe enough for me. Next to other person.
Okay, thank you for your explanation, Furi. So here I will continue the explanation that discuss about acknowledging payment. So let's get started.
Okay, so before we discuss further the material of acknowledging payment, we must know what is acknowledging payment. So, acknowledging payment is a response letter created by the seller to notify the buyer that payment has been successfully received by the seller. So this letter is made by the seller for the buyer. Okay, seller to buyer. Or it can be referred to as a reply letter that was previously made by the buyer. In essence, this letter is a reply letter from a making payment. Okay, next, we will discuss about paragraph in the acknowledging payment. Actually, part of acknowledging payment is the same as part of making payment. In this acknowledging payment, it also has several parts such as heading, reference number, date, inside address, salutation, subject, 3 paragraphs, complementary clause, signature, name, position, and carbon copies. But here the difference is the content of the letter written in the paragraph of the letter. Okay, in the first paragraph of this letter is the opening paragraph. In this paragraph, you should thank the letter of payment that has been sent by the buyer and inform that the letter of payment has been received. And then the second paragraph is describing action. So, in this paragraph, you must notify the recipient of the letter or buyer that you have received that money sent by the buyer to settle payment. And the third paragraph is closing paragraph. In this paragraph, you must thank you for the payment that has been made by the buyer and attach an official receipt and inform the buyer that you are waiting for the further orders from the buyer to the seller. Okay, so these are the three paragraphs that must be present when making an acknowledging payment. Next, after we discuss the contents of the three paragraphs in the acknowledging payment, I will explain some phrases from the three paragraphs. Okay, first, the opening paragraph. At the opening of this paragraph, we must thank you and inform that the payment letter has been received from the buyer. Here are some examples of sentences in the opening paragraph. The first, you can use a sentence like a thank you for your letter of blah blah blah, advising us that you have instructed your bank to remit the sum of dollars or rupiah blah blah blah. Okay, the second example, you can use a sentence like a thank you for your credit transfer you have made to our account at bank blah blah blah. And the last example, you can use sentence like a thank you for your letter of blah 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 enclosing a check for dollars or rupiah blah 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 in full settlement of our invoice number blah blah blah. Okay, this is an opening paragraph. And after the opening paragraph, the second paragraph in acknowledging payment is a describing an action. In this section, you can tell the buyer that the payment money has been received in accordance with the agreed amount. So you can use a sentence like our bank has advised us that they have received the amount of dollars or rupiah blah 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 in settlement of our invoice. And next, okay, and the last paragraph in this acknowledging payment is the closing paragraph. In this paragraph, you must thank you for the payment that has been made by a buyer and attach an official receipt and inform the buyer that you are waiting for further orders from the buyer to the seller. So you can use sentence like we thank you for your prompt settlement of the invoice and look forward to receiving your next order. Or it could be using sentence like we enclose our official receipt and hope you will be satisfied with the goods we send. And or you can use sentence like we are pleased to enclose our official receipt and look forward to receiving your next order. So this is a closing paragraph. Okay, so this acknowledging payment has two purposes. The first purpose is informing the customer that you have received the payment and providing you with yet another change to advance you or service. So this acknowledging payment is made as proof that the transaction made by buyers and sellers have been complete, and the seller can also promote their products by offering to buy their products again through this letter. And the second purpose of acknowledging payment is written to inform an individual the payment was made by him or her after it being past its due date has been received successful. So this is purpose of acknowledging payment. Okay, next, we have sample of acknowledging payment. Nah, this is acknowledging payment. So, this is an acknowledging payment made by the new international paint company for PT Mapolindo Raya. So, new international paint company as a seller and PT Mapolindo Raya as a buyer. So, we can see in this example of acknowledging payment, there are several parts starting from a heading which contains the company name and company address, and then there is the reference number. Okay, this is a reference number, your reference and our reference, and then the date of writing the letter, and then inside address, salutation, and then subject invoice, and then there are also 3 paragraphs consisting of the opening paragraph. This is an opening paragraph, and then describing action. This is a describing action, and the last closing paragraph. And also there is a complementary clause. This is a complementary clause, and then signature, name, and position. Okay, so this is an example of acknowledging payment. So this is the explanation that I can give. Next will be explained by my friend. Thank you.
Thank you for the explanation, Rizki. And I will continue this presentation about terms of payment. Let's check this out. Okay, for the first is invoice. Definition of invoice is a document containing a list of consignments accompanied by a description of the name, amount, price to be paid. Apart from containing details of the purchase, invoice are often used as a means of invoicing between sellers and buyers. Next is part of invoice. There are customer's name, seller's name, purchase order information, description of goods or service purchased, and then total cost. There are samples of invoice. You can see in here like this. Next is receipt. Definition of receipt is a document which is provided by a business to its customers every time a product or service is sold. It's a buyer's proof or purchase or confirmation payment, usually in writing that it issued after payment is received by the seller. Information must put on a receipt. First, your company's detail including name, address, phone, and our email address. And next, the date of transaction showing date, month, and year. A list of products or services showing a brief description of the product and quantity sold. Next is the amount of the transaction with the total amount broken down to show the net amount. VAT, if VAT has been added, and any discount. And the last is the method of payment, like cash, credit or debit, and etc. Here are the sample of receipt. You can see in here there are samples of receipt. And then next is remittance advice. Definition of remittance advice is a document which provides a breakdown of the invoice included on a payment. It's sent from a customer to a supplier, letting the supplier know they have paid their invoice. In its simplest form, it shows the invoice number and payment amount sent are enclosed. Remittance advice should include name and address of the buyer, And next is name and address of the supplier, and then date of the remittance, and then remittance amount, and an invoice number, and then payment amount, and method of payment. And next, here are the samples of remittance advice. You can look in here. Is remittance application from the bank. Definition is the document that shows the payment made by the buyer to the seller via the bank payment method. The buyer will transfer the payment money through the buyer's bank to the seller's bank. Here are the samples of remittance application from the bank. You can see in here. Here are samples. That was the presentation from our group. Sorry if there are any mistakes, and thank you.